Hey, Matrix Live. I'm here with Dan Callahan, Dan Callahan, who is Callahad. All right, okay. What is the story there?
So back in university, we had usernames that were assigned to fit into 8 characters. So we got the first seven, up to the first seven of our surname,
Right,
plus our first initial. So Dan Callahan turns into Callahad, and now,
gotcha.
more than a decade later, it's stuck.
Yeah, that's fascinating, isn't it? So I was a quite similar thing. I'm known as Parson B4 to some friends who have similar setup. Yeah, that's really funny that those things stick around. Okay, but why are we talking to you? Who are you? Who are you to us?
So about 3 months ago, I joined Element as an engineering manager responsible for the back end team. So I look after the Synapse engineers, and then we also just recently welcomed a dedicated security researcher to Element, who also reports to me. So hopefully uh, I'm responsible for making sure we are shipping good, reliable, and secure software
Uh huh.
to all of you out there in the web.
Yeah, and I think that that's been certainly improving. It's funny though, isn't it? Because 3 months is not very long at all in a role like this.
No, and I'm kind of cheating in that a fortnight of that was over the Christmas holidays.
Yeah,
So
fair.
so I maybe have 2 months on the ground, but
Wow.
it's been a really wonderful experience coming in and trying to get to know the project and the team and just how things work at Element.
I mean, I am actually. What I hope that we can ask you about later is, real first impressions around Synapse because it is a project which is definitely kind of in flight and under heavy development. But what about? Let's talk about you first of all. Where are you in the world?
So I'm actually in Belfast in Northern Ireland. I moved here from America
Right.
about 3 years ago,
Okay.
and have spent nearly as much time in lockdown as I have not in lockdown. But we moved over here, and it's just been wonderful because we're finding that it's Belfast itself is a city that's just big enough to really have everything you might want, but not so big that it's not human scale.
Mm.
And then, especially with COVID, it's been nice to be able to kind of push organizations on, hey, let's see what we can do with remote work. Let's see
Yeah.
how this works out for us. And I had joined Element from Mozilla, which had a very strong about 50-50 split between remote workers and
Mm.
office-based workers.
Yep.
And I've really enjoyed, I guess, that transition that the rest of the world
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
now making.
I mean, Element and Mozilla are both obviously huge remote work first pushing kind of places. Yeah, and Element has had to, or New Vector as it was, has had to go really hard down that road.
One of the more interesting cultural aspects of joining Element that we are selling
Mm.
a communications suite is that there seems to be a reluctance to use email with an Element,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
that blew my mind when I first joined because I came in asking, well, what's the team's mailing list? How do I? Well, what do you mean mailing list? Why
Yep.
would you email someone? Well, but and I think
Yeah.
there's something to that where just yesterday at the top of Hacker News, there's an article saying if it needs to last more than a day, don't put it in
Mm.
chat.
Yeah,
And
I
I
saw that
think
too.
there is a need for that kind of blended communication mode where uh, I really enjoy using Matrix for um, more kind of immediate discussions,
Hmm.
but also when you're pinging someone in a in kind of like in real time in a chat system, that carries a sense of immediacy that sometimes isn't warranted, right?
Yes, right. So there's a few things there. There's how does it feel to be forced into a synchronous conversation when it could be absolutely asynchronous, and
Mhm.
chat can be both of those things. But then also how do you archive and come back to chat? I mean, I shouldn't be name dropping competitors, but I know that Teams haven't they been trialing a summarizer bot or
I
something.
I don't actually know. Most of my experience has been with IRC, Matrix, and
Hmm.
Slack. I know that disciplined use of threads in Slack can be really helpful at taming the noise. And I hear that systems like Zulip, which is also open source,
Yeah.
have a really nice threaded model. Um, we've been doing some experiments at Element, the Cerulean front end,
Mm.
uh, with some of the threading MSCs that exist. And so I'm hopeful that I hesitate to name any sort of timeline because I haven't been here long enough to really know. But I'm hopeful that we'll get proper support for threading in a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't like to make commitments on these kinds of calls, but yeah, it's definitely it's with Cerulean being actively tested and developed. It's getting a lot more attention than it was, I guess. So you were with Mozilla before.
I was
What did
for
you do
8.5 years.
Blimey! Wait a minute. Were you involved in the sort of the dramas of the last couple of years? Then, where they let go of lots of people.
Which dramas? I was made part of or was made redundant as part of the August layoffs.
Okay.
Um, Part of that. So I initially joined to work on the Persona project,
Right.
which was a federated authentication system, trying to basically build Facebook Connect, but without the Facebook. Like, how can you just type in an email address and have a smooth, consistent, standard-spaced authentication experience without site-specific passwords? When that project decided to, when Mozilla decided that they were going to wind down their investment in that project, I kind of took lead of the team and helped us mothball it, transition the people off. And I found in my work there, I came on as an engineer, but I gravitated towards more of the interface between what we were building and the outside world. So looking at the API level, looking at our docs, looking at our examples, helping third parties integrate. And I found I really enjoyed acting as that bridge between the people at Mozilla who were just world-class engineers. We had excellent engineers, but we didn't have as many people kind of taking what we were doing and showing it to the world in a way that people outside of the Mozilla bubble could understand.
Right.
So I pivoted more into developer relations, did a fair amount of work there, especially around the web extensions push for Firefox, quite a bit of Rust and WebAssembly towards the end. And then in my last 6 months or so at Mozilla, worked on the MDN team where I led the transition of the MDN platform from Python 2 to Python 3, from Django 2 to Django 3, Django 1 to 2, Django 1 to 2, version numbers.
Yeah.
But doing that
2
kind of
to 3 is
architectural
the
work.
important thing for Python.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And so when Mozilla came around and did a reduction in force, which took out about around a quarter of the company, I took stock of the outside world and what opportunities existed, and I realized what I really wanted was something that kept me involved with the more human aspects of software, but that wasn't trying not to compromise my ethics.
Yeah, I understand that.
And so I went to the Element homepage, the Element.io's page, scrolled down to the bottom, and there's a bit in the footer. It just says, privacy is protected by the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And there is something very appealing about working for an organization that is so fundamentally committed to security and privacy, that's committed to building not just a product, but building an open platform that's starting with a protocol rather than an API. And that's something that I think has been lost in the internet today. Whereas if you look at things like email, IRC, these NNTP started with RFCs, with the specification of the protocol of how these systems would work, and then completely separate to that, people built clients and they built systems to work with that protocol.
Yeah.
And it seems like we have, for the sake of expediency, moved to a world where you build the app first, and then start maybe giving people API access tokens and maybe exposing parts of it that you want out there, but maybe you don't want other parts. And it makes it very hard to interoperate. It makes it hard to take the software and use it in the way that works for you that may not be how the creators originally intended. It makes it harder to build things that make software accessible. And so seeing that the Matrix protocol was at the foundation of all of this, and that is developed in the open, that it is intended to be a free and open standard, was really compelling.
So there's a need to get users, and there's a need to often get ad impressions running, which for a lot of applications is going to come far before the need to protect users, or even the need to create a well-architectured project.
Right, and the move away from software, from client-side software to web applications, which brings undeniable benefits, but it also imposes an ongoing maintenance cost. Where I could pull out a CD-ROM that has, Office 98 on it, and I have no concerns about the fact that is just riddled with bugs and security issues, because I'm only going to feed it trusted data.
Right.
Whereas if you stop patching a WordPress server for 9 months, it's not your WordPress server anymore.
Yeah.
So as I was saying, so I think one of the things we've lost is this in this move to web services, which bring undeniable advantages. We've lost the idea of having software that is done and shipped and static, and there's these ongoing costs to make sure that the servers are online, they're patched, they're maintained, and I think that creates pressures on the business model that have moved people away from building protocols and clients and towards building apps and APIs.
Yeah, I mean, and the need to... I think there's lots of different pressures here. The need to control the software, the desire to be able to update and iterate quickly, and also the appeal of how much easier it is to monetize a SaaS model, because you can constantly upsell without needing to sell anything from scratch. So yeah, there's all kinds of pressures that are leading us to this web SaaS world. An element
being in a multi-device world where it's been so long since I only had my computer. Now I've got a computer, there's a tablet in the house, God knows how many phones.
Yep.
So the web gives you and just network-based delivery of software gives you such a seamless experience that it's undeniable that's the way to go. But it makes it hard for people who want to build something that is interoperable, that want to build something that is based on a standard.
Yeah. We've gone so far off my original line of questioning. But the original questioning I had was stuff like what, based on the stacks that you used professionally, what did you enjoy? Like at Mozilla, what was your real preference, especially around technology? I know that you said that conceptually what you really liked was the sort of human interaction and the human interfacing, not meaning UI. I mean more conceptually than that. But
right.
what about the tech?
So on the tech side, I've had a really interesting suite of tools I've had to use. I had one job about a decade ago where I used both Arc and Clojure in production. So two esoteric lists in one startup.
Yeah.
But at Mozilla, it was mostly obviously for Firefox, C++. But most of our web stack is Python. Fair bit of Node.js. And then towards the latter end of my tenure there, I got into a bit more Rust, WebAssembly, that sort of work. I always come back to Python. I absolutely love Rust. I love the Rust community. I love what Rust is doing in terms of making systems-level programming accessible to people. But I gave a keynote at PyCon in 2018. And one of the things I found interesting at that conference was I went and talked to all these people that I'd known for over a decade through that conference in the Python community. And a lot of us were not using Python as our primary tool in our work anymore. But we're still coming to the conference and we're still participating in the community because the Python community is such a broad and diversely applicable set of tools. So you get people from web development, scientific computing, just systems administration, any sort of domain
and
that you have
IoT,
a computational problem. Yeah, Python's a reasonable choice. And the community has very intentionally tried to structure itself as one that welcomes people from different walks of life, people from different levels of experience. And so that's always felt like a home to me. And now leading the Synapse team, or supporting the Synapse team, that's a massive Python project. And that's the first time I've really been paid modulo a little bit of work on MDN for Python to be my main thing.
Right, interesting.
And that's been really exciting and really enjoyable.
Okay, yeah, that is cool. Yeah, that is cool. So Python, I came to Python really late, but it's part of it for me is the community and the diversity of it that constantly makes me, that makes me come back to it. All right, so we talked a little bit about why you wanted to join Element, and that was only sort of 3 months ago. I guess the hiring process started before that. But the state of the Python project, what is your Synapse is an interesting situation because it is the first implementation, it is also easily the most widely used implementation. As such, there's a lot of pressure to keep it running and to balance the needs of technical debt, features, and performance. What was your initial take when you joined the project?
So my initial take was just that, wow, we're doing a lot of things. And one of the things that struck me is that the code base itself and many of the members of the team go all the way back to the beginning of the Matrix project. And so there's a lot of history there. And somehow we've been able to take this program that started almost as a prototype, this idea of Matrix, and turn it into something that is stable and scalable and can support massive public instances like matrix.org, as well as hundreds of thousands of users in government, the French government's CHAP application. And I think to have software that that somehow has those two constituencies, we've got the open source free software privacy enthusiast world on one end, and then we've got government clients on the other. And having a single piece of software that can span both of those groups is, I think, a pretty impressive achievement. That said, it creates some unique constraints where we don't have anything else that can go that big.
Right.
And so on the Synapse side, we have to be stable. We have to be reliable. We're here, we exist, we can support those deployments. And that creates an opportunity for some of these other home server implementations. You see Dendrite, Conduit, to come in and say, hey, maybe we can try experimenting with rethinking things, with building things in a different way. And they can start targeting these smaller deployments and then build up, whereas just by the nature of how the Matrix ecosystem is developed so far, we have to be kind of the stalwart, reliable home server for the time being.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose that comes into it questions what will be the position of the market, I suppose, assuming that we believe that Matrix will come to be a huge force. The sort of dominant players at the moment, Synapse, Dendrite, Conduit's coming on. Construct is quite mature and has always been focused on performance. But do you think that there's an ongoing place for Synapse to be the stalwart, you called it? I mean, I'm imagining the way that Apache Apache Server used to be. Right,
and I hesitate to bring up the Apache Nginx sorts of comparisons, because I think there's a coloring that comes with that Apache is old and stodgy, and I don't think that is true of Synapse. But there is this aspect where if we are building to an open standard, then there shouldn't be any difference from the operator standpoint of using Dendrite or using Synapse or using Construct or Conduit, provided that we all are implementing the same standard in the same way. And that's one of the benefits, especially you see this in the web browser world, of having competing implementations, is it makes sure that your standard is complete and that you can build something out from that. And the legacy of the protocol will live on beyond any particular implementation. That said, if we all are doing that and we all are compatible and we're implementing it correctly, then you can just swap out with whatever you're more comfortable running. If you're more comfortable deploying a Rust binary or a Go binary, maybe you would prefer Dendrite or Conduit. They may have ways that they can integrate into your infrastructure differently that's more or less kind of preferable with how you like to operate. In the same way that some people choose Nginx, some people choose Caddy, still people on Windows Server use IIS, but it all kind of serves the same web. We want there to be a variety of home servers that can handle different types of scale, different types of use cases. And Synapse, at least for the foreseeable future, should be the choice if you're going for a large-scale, reliable kind of production deployment. My hope is that we'll have more competition in that space in the future, but where we are right now is like we have to fulfill that mission.
It comes back to a repeat of what you said earlier, which is that if the standards if the standards come first, then the implementations are almost a detail that we can talk about later. And we're not quite in that world yet, but it does feel like that's the world we want to be in, where Synapse is one of many implementations that fulfills the standard. On that subject, then, let's talk about the future of the project. So there's a few ways to break this down, and obviously you have quite a holistic view of it, whereas I have a much more user centric view, and I just want all the features and all the performance right now. So go do it. Get off this call. But there's a few things. Presence, knocking, and spaces come to mind, but maybe there's more going on here.
Absolutely. So one of the things that's really kind of on top of mind right now is that FOSDEM is going to be hosted this year virtually on Matrix.
Yeah.
And so most of the team is focused on making sure that works and works well. So we've been doing more behind the scenes work in terms of we just landed in I believe it's in 1.26 will come out, should be an RC on Tuesday. Some massive improvements to the speed at which redaction happens in large rooms. So really improving our capacity to do large scale moderation.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of time working on algorithmic improvements to the state resolution algorithm so that hopefully we can fit into a tighter envelope of CPU usage when there are large rooms with many federating users. All this in service of just making sure that when FOSDEM comes around, we don't fall over, and that it's every bit as reliable as the brick and mortar buildings in Brussels.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you been to FOSDEM, by the way?
I have been. I went once and gave a talk in the Mozilla dev room about Persona years and years ago, alongside a colleague of mine, Shane Tomlinson. Nice. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
But the moving it online, I mean, hopefully there will be a little more kind of elbow room,
right,
compared to some of the
track and. So I'm looking forward to trying to recreate the atmosphere of. We have an especially busy corner, even within the busy context of the place, and I'm looking forward to recreating that online with videos. Anyway, you were talking about state resolution, particularly.
Yeah, so just kind of making sure that we are scalable, we're as efficient as possible. I will note we'll see what comes of this, but as we've been talking, Eric deployed a change to how we do the state resolution calculation.
Yeah.
And reported, quote, well, that did not go 100% smoothly. So maybe 1.27. We'll see.
All right, let's see.
But that's part of the excitement, is that we can.
I mean, state resolution.
I shouldn't be too flippant about, but we can experiment on matrix.org. We have a community of understanding, enthusiastic users.
Yeah.
And we have a large scale deployment that we can. We have the ability to roll out features, and if they don't work, we can roll them back.
Yeah.
And we can make sure this works before all of you listening actually try to run this yourselves.
Sure. So what are the features do we have on the horizon?
So the other things on the horizon, there's a lot of interest around finding how we can enable presence. Presence is a really resource intensive feature, and we would like to spend some time, hopefully this quarter, investigating why that is, because one of the first things we recommend is well, you need some more headroom, turn off presence.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we don't have the same sort of experience running that at scale. We'll be looking into that. We also should land very shortly knocking, which is an MSC, which allows people to request access to a room, to request an invite.
Yep. Yeah, that's really helpful.
Yeah, super helpful. And the other big piece that's getting a lot of attention and a lot of discussion within Element is spaces, and this kind of replacement or reimagining of what community should look like. So you can have kind of a hierarchical list of rooms that either could be something you join and you see the list, or something you create yourself and curate for your own use. And I think that will go a long way towards making experiences like using Matrix in a corporate setting, or using Matrix at your work, and also in other contexts, a lot more manageable. And that was one of the things that was interesting at Mozilla. Was I experienced Matrix back at LinuxConf Australia several years ago, and then fast forward until last year, and Mozilla selected Matrix to replace our IRC server.
Yep.
And looking at the improvement in the quality of the user experience, the quality of the software between those 2 points, was really inspiring. That was a big factor in my decision to come in and kind of pitch my lot in with the Element project, or with the Matrix project, and as an Element employee.
That's interesting.
And I'm super excited that once we get spaces, we'll also, I think, have a really compelling story for communities.
Yep. So space. I mean, a lot of people are asking for spaces. I mean, it's been one of the things on the horizon for a while. I mean, groups as rooms, everything as rooms. Why, if it's truly just as rooms, why is there a lot of server work needed for this? I imagine that it would just be metadata in a room, which is then handled by the client.
So that is a question that I do not yet know the answer to, being so exceptionally new to
Gotcha.
this project. I know that one of the big challenges is that we need to be able to peek into rooms over Federation to really make this work, because
Yes.
the spaces themselves are modeled as rooms,
Got it.
and so there's a certain degree of how do you make that efficient and possible and effective, because the spaces themselves being part of a room, the server has to be able to kind of communicate that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Gotcha. So, yeah, we need peeking over Federation. Fab. Dan, thank you so much for taking the time. Was there anything else you wanted to say or add? Doesn't have to be about Matrix. You can.
um, oh wow. Well, I think at Mozilla we would always end in calls with "keep rocking the free web,"
Keep
and I think
rocking the
that
free web.
that applies here too. We're working on an open protocol. Choose open technologies. Choose private technologies, and I hope to see you in Matrix.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Matrix Live, and thank you, Dan. Bye.
Bye.